Last Shabbat, a most precious, unique, and one-of-a-kind human being was untimely wrenched from our midst. It is both difficult and painful to even contemplate our Jewish world bereft of Lord Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, Zichrono Livracha. Today, our community comes together to offer its heartfelt condolences, firstly, to his dear wife, Lady Elaine, a true lady in every sense of the word, and to the wide extended Sacks family. Together, we know we have lost someone who was endowed by our Creator with gifts seldom found in combination. A keen and sharp mind, a nobility of character, a moral visionary, an unparalleled genius, a brilliant orator, and one of Jewry's greatest leaders of our generation. Simply put, we have lost our best and most beloved ambassador. But what we have not lost is the breadth and depth of his writing and teaching, which will endure in his countless books and articles. We have not lost his lifetime of exemplary service to raise the status of Judaism resonating throughout the world. The Toronto community will forever cherish the memories of his frequent visits with us, as recently as this year, when the pandemic struck and forced a lockdown and Zoom became our mode of communication. We needed chizuk, we needed strength, so we invited Rabbi Sacks to address our federation with his eloquent words of hope and promise. He brilliantly explained that Jews throughout the grand sweep of history have always risen from crises, which brought forth opportunities to begin anew, to begin new chapters in our lives. And with those words, he set our community on a most successful launch of our Federation's emergency campaign for community resilience. On a more personal note, Henry and I vividly recall a conversation with the rabbi some years ago when he told us that he could have remained as the chief rabbi of the British Commonwealth, but deliberately chose not to. Why? Because he wanted to spend quality time devoted to thinking, devoted to writing, devoted to reaching out in order to engage the next generation of leaders. And so he did. How precious are the gifts of those extra years that he gave to us. At this moment, I feel privileged to be part of this memorial tribute organized by UJA Federation of Greater Toronto. As he did in his life, Rabbi Sacks continues to gather together the breadth of the Jewish world, even after his passing. As we begin our program, we will hear from the rabbi's niece, Miriam Koschitzky, the closest link in our community to the Sacks family, also our great niece. We will be privileged to hear from rabbis of various streams all across the GTA. They will share some of Rabbi Sacks's timeless wisdom that is relevant for each of us individually, as a community, and as a Jewish people.
I want to go back to 2011 when Rabbi Sacks visited the Toronto Jewish community. He spent Shabbat at the Bayit. It was a tremendous privilege. And the experience was electrifying because not only did he come in with a very powerful message, a message of unity, a message of sanctifying God wherever a Jew goes, and a message of just love for his fellow Jew and his fellow human being. Friday morning was breakfast at the UJA at the Lipa Green Center, and every single Jewish leader and member of the clergy felt that they were honored and respected by Rabbi Sacks and that they were part of the same association, because for him, divisions were anathema. They didn't make a difference. Today, you know what the most common commentary that our B'nai Mitzvah are choosing to quote in their speeches? It's Rabbi Sacks from Covenant and Conversation, his weekly Torah portion. And that's how I know that he's the rabbi of the English-speaking world. You know, we say a phrase in Hebrew, Chaval al da'avdin v'la mishtakchin. When a person passes away, sometimes you can say truly, How unfortunate that this person has left the world because we will never find his replacement. It's true, there are many people who are extremely erudite, extremely articulate, extremely God-fearing, extremely charismatic, extremely unifying. But to find all of those qualities in one person is something that I don't think that we'll ever be able to replace. And that's why we miss Rabbi Sacks so much. I will miss him for his example of what it means to be a rabbi and to be a leader.
If you want to find your purpose in life, think about the following sentence, where what you want to do meets what needs to be done. That is where God wants us to be. So many of us have passions. And if you don't have a passion, take time out to discover it. Dream a lot, fantasize a lot. Think what really would be a life you would really live for. Keep your dreams. Joseph dreamt dreams. A Jewish leader is one who dreams dreams. And that's what you want to do. But in the meanwhile, there's a world out there. And that world has needs for some things and not others, at some times and not others. And somehow or other, you have to connect to that world. And that is why I say your purpose in life comes when those two things meet. What you want to do and what needs to be done. And for each of us, it's different. But it's when they come together that you will know your purpose in life. And if you get it wrong 1 or 2 times, don't worry about it. None of us gets it right first time.
Thousands of words have already been written and spoken about Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, rabbi, teacher, philosopher, spokesman for the Jewish people. I want to talk about Rabbi Sacks from another point of view, as my uncle. When we were young, growing up in Jerusalem, my brothers and I used to call my uncle the chief rabbit. He loved it. When my uncle met any of us, after a long delay, it was always with a huge hello. Miriam, how are you? He really wanted to know, what are you doing? What is happening? He wanted to find out all about what we were doing to point you in directions you may not have thought about, giving you names you had never heard of to look up. My brother Dan was studying to be a psychologist. One Shabbat evening, he walked with my uncle back to his hotel, telling him he's studying psychology and was particularly interested in CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. Ah, said my uncle, Aaron Beck, such a sweet man. They spoke on the subject for 20 minutes. At the end of the conversation, Dan asked my father, how come Uncle Jonathan knows so much about the subject? Uncle Jonathan knew everything. My uncle never spoke down to us. As the Times of London wrote, he always made you feel clever. My uncle wanted to learn from us. He loved technology and wanted to know how he could use it to reach new audiences. My uncle wanted to learn about the latest Israeli music. Music was very important to my uncle. He would discuss Beethoven and Eminem with the same intensity. He was mesmerized by the musical Hamilton. There's not a film my uncle did not know about, a book he had not read. And he looked at them all through a Jewish teaching lens. My uncle loved Israel and the idea of Israel. We all know he spoke in every forum in support of Israel and against anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. He was one of Israel's greatest spokesmen, but he also loved being in Israel. It was where he could take his jacket off and relax. It may not be Banff National Park or Bondi Beach, but as he would say, Aval zeh shelanu, but this is ours. However busy his schedule, my uncle always made time for his family and would do whatever he could to answer our requests. My mother and I have worked for many years for an organization for severely handicapped children called Aleh. On our behalf, he visited Aleh's special homes on numerous occasions, spoke at events, and even came to Toronto to speak on their behalf. At the time of my brother Gad's bar mitzvah, Gad's true love was football. So my uncle went with him to Teddy Stadium, the Jerusalem equivalent of Toronto's Rogers Centre or Melbourne's cricket ground, to play football with him out on the pitch. So while most bar mitzvah boy films may have greetings from family or blessings and well wishes from friends, my brother Gad's film had him taking penalty shots against Chief Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks. My uncle was a warm, emotional, and loving man. He enjoyed nothing better than teaching children or students, learning with them, growing with them. I have wonderful photos of my uncle on the floor with my young children during his last visit to Toronto. Uncle Jonathan never missed an opportunity to give credit to my Aunt Elaine, without whom my uncle would not have made it through life. My uncle never did learn the PIN for his credit card. I learned many lessons from my uncle, simple lessons which I hope will accompany me through life. Love your family with unconditional love. Love people who are different from you, because people who are different make you broader, while people who are just like yourself make you narrower. Give your partner a compliment every day, and so many more lessons which my uncle taught us and which he himself lived by. Rabbi Sacks belonged to the world. He was Prince Charles's rabbi. He was Prime Ministers Tony Blair and David Cameron's rabbi. He was author Amos Oz's rabbi, and he was singer Ishai Ribo's rabbi. And he was rabbi to so many more famous and important people. But for us, he was a dignified leader of our family. Rabbi, Lord, Professor, light unto the nations, Uncle Jonathan, Yehi Zichro Baruch.
Anti-Semitism begins with Jews, but it never ends with Jews. And the reason is because anti-Semitism is hatred of difference. But difference is what makes us human. Precisely because every one of us is different from every other one of us, each of us is unique, therefore irreplaceable, therefore sacred. Therefore, a nation that has no room for Jews has no room for humanity. And that is why we must stand together in the fight against anti-Semitism. Not just Jews, but everyone who cares for the sanctity of human life and the non-negotiable principles of freedom and dignity.
I'm Adam Minsky, President and CEO of UJA Federation of Greater Toronto. Like each of you, I've been impacted by the saddening and untimely passing of the great Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks. Throughout the week, I've been reflecting on what his unparalleled leadership has meant for the entire Jewish people, for our community, and to me personally. Rabbi Sacks had a deep affinity for the Toronto Jewish community. Whenever asked by UJA to share words of wisdom at one of our meetings or events, he never hesitated to say yes, and he never failed to inspire us. I always remember attending a round table that UJA convened here in Toronto a number of years ago for Rabbi Sacks to meet with rabbis from across our community. Going into that meeting, I had a pretty good sense that this was a profound and visionary leader, one who had an incredibly rare ability to speak with eloquence and moral authority, not only to Jews of all backgrounds, but also to people from all walks of life and broader society. And walking out of that meeting after seeing the down-to-earth way in which he engaged our rabbis, speaking with absolute humility and candor about the challenges facing the Jewish world, I realized that one of the things that made him a gadol was his innate understanding of the lived experiences of our people. A connection he never lost, no matter how brilliant a scholar or prolific a global leader he became. Rabbi Sacks was one of those exceptional leaders who not only had his finger on the pulse of the Jewish people, he had this terrific gift of making our traditions and teachings understandable, relevant, thought-provoking, compelling, and ultimately beautiful for Jews across the spectrum of Jewish practice. In so doing, he reminded us that Torah inspires and unifies us as one Jewish people, which is especially poignant in times of uncertainty and challenge. The world is a bit darker with Rabbi Sacks' passing, but he would no doubt call on each of us to do our part to make it brighter, just as he always did, today and tomorrow. May Rabbi Sacks' memory forever be for a blessing.
When I think of Rabbi Sacks, Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, I think of Parshat Ki Tisa during the Durban II conference. This was a conference on racism and anti-Semitism, and ironically, it was anti-Semitic in its very nature. I remember reading his comments on Parshat Ki Tisa, which is a parsha that contains many of the mitzvot that are found in the Torah, and something that he pointed out, which was really profound, was that human rights are universal, but they speak with the Jewish accent. In addition, he pointed out that the whole notion of human rights on an international stage comes out of the Jewish experience, specifically the horrors of the Holocaust. that there was no notion of human rights internationally until after the genocide against the Jews perpetrated by the Nazis in World War II. And so human rights may be a universal language, he wrote, but it speaks with a Jewish accent. And for whatever reason, as a young rabbi, that poetic, profound verse has stuck with me for some 20 plus years. Though Rabbi Sacks is now no longer with us, his teachings will endure forever. We can be inspired by them, but most importantly, we should be inspired to live by them and make them meaningful in our lives. I know I intend to do that by continuing to learn with him and from him through his writings and through sharing his teaching of Torah as we are today. Thank you.
To be a Jew is to be part of the most remarkable story ever lived by any people, covering more countries, more adverse circumstances, more triumphs and tragedies than any other story. And then the sudden realization that every one of us has a chapter to write in that story and hand the book on. That is what it is to be a Jew. And the second I realized that, I knew I couldn't walk away. I had to write my chapter and then give the book to my children and grandchildren.
Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, alav hashalom, was not a pluralist in that he did not believe all religions were equally valid, or that all streams of Jewish life, for that matter, were equally valid. But he was a staunch pluralist in that he believed all religions had something admirable to contribute to humanity, and that every Jew, believing or not, halachically observant or not, every one of us has a role to play in the unfolding of Jewish history. Moreover, Rabbi Sacks was a pluralist in that he believed and he taught that Torah wisdom has something essential to teach every Jew and every human being. In his book, The Dignity of Difference, Rabbi Sacks teaches a message the world desperately needs to hear today. One belief more than any other, he wrote, is responsible for the slaughter of individuals on the altars of the great historical ideals. It is the belief that those who do not share my faith or my race or my ideology do not share my humanity. He was a master teacher with the rare ability to help his students see the forest and the trees. Just one example, he died on Shabbat Vayera. Rabbi Sacks drew out from the drama of the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, the pivotal message that children are not the property of their parents. The angel stayed Abraham's knife in order that the value of the individual could emerge. Isaac was not only the son of Abraham and Sarah, he would also become the ancestor of you and me. Rabbi Sacks teaches us, as long as parents believed they owned their children, the concept of the individual could not yet be born. The Torah represents the birth of the individual as the central figure in the moral life. Because children, all children, belong to God, parenthood is not ownership, but guardianship. As soon as they reach the age of maturity, children become independent moral agents with their own dignity and freedom. So it was with so many of Rabbi Sacks's teachings. He returns us to the core belief that God has given every human being a chance at a life of meaning and purpose, even a chance at eternity, if we only rise to the occasion of carrying out our God-given moral responsibilities. The Torah of Rabbi Jonathan Sacks was at once particular and universal, rigorous and relevant, elevating and eloquent, timeless and always timely. He drew us in and he made us thirsty for more. What is the bracha we recite when encountering a great teacher of Torah? Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, shechalak mechochmato l're'av. Praised are you, eternal our God, ruler of the universe, who has imparted a measure of your wisdom to those who revere you. Amen.
Already from a young age, I often heard my dear father of blessed memory quoting Rabbi Sacks' brilliance. He was someone I always looked up to and tried to emulate. There are many volumes to be written, as I'm sure there will be, about Rabbi Sacks and the person he was. However, I would like to share with you a few personal ideas that have been on my mind the past few days about the special and extraordinary giant of a man Rabbi Sacks was. Despite his brilliance and greatness, he possessed the unique capability of connecting with everyone, regardless of their intellectual capacity. A great teacher is not one that is a genius and that can relay complex and esoteric concepts, but rather a great teacher is one that can take these complex and challenging teachings and make them understandable to everyone, even the most simple student. That was Rabbi Sacks. An interesting observation since his passing is that although Rabbi Sacks was a global rabbi, a chief rabbi, a known leader revered and respected by heads of states, religious leaders the world over, his loss is felt by many individuals as though it was their own personal loss. With Rabbi Sacks, it was never about him, but rather about bringing light, goodness, and Torah into the world. Rabbi Sacks was a humble yet towering intellectual giant who was a truly outstanding scholar and a mensch of the highest caliber. These are character traits not often found bundled together in one individual. What each and every one of us can do is we can ensure that this great light doesn't go out. And we do so by learning from his character traits and virtues and by emulating the way he lived his life, which in turn will make this world a better and brighter place by each of us taking on an extra act of goodness. And by doing an extra act of goodness, which in turn will make this world a better and brighter place. Through doing so, we will ensure that the memory and legacy of Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks, Zechrono Livracha, will continue to live on forever. As we see in this week's Torah portion, Chayei Sarah, the life of Sarah. The name of the parsha is Chayei Sarah, the life of Sarah, but in the immediate first verse of the parsha, it deals with the passing of Sarah. So the question is asked, why call it the life of Sarah if it deals with the passing of Sarah? And the answer is to teach us a profound lesson, that true life is eternal life. True life transcends the physical body. True life is determined in the legacy that we live on. Tehei nafsho tzura b'tzora chayim, may his soul be bound up in the bond of life. May his memory be a blessing to us all. Amen.
Greetings to you, the leaders and members of the Jewish community in what I call Toronto and you call Toronto. I'm sure you know this already without my saying so, but let me say it anyway. You are a role model for the rest of us. The Toronto Jewish community is one of the finest, very finest in the world, and I've been to most Jewish communities in the world. And there's nothing quite like you, so that what you do today, others will do tomorrow. And that is why what you do today is so important.
offer our collective appreciation to those who enabled us to participate in this moving memorial. Miriam Koschitzky, Rabbi Koropkin, Rabbi Splansky, Rabbi Wernick, Rabbi Dubrawsky, Cantor, Loomer, and Adam Minsky. Great leaders like Rabbi Jonathan Sacks never really leave this world, for their great deeds and thoughts and actions live on forever. His name will never be far from our lips. He will forever remain the most often quoted rabbi of our time. May the words of the Torah which he so lovingly embraced continue to enrich us, guide us, and above all, strengthen us, and may they help to heal our broken hearts. May his memory be a blessing and a glory to his people. Yehi Zichron Baruch.
The COVID-19 pandemic is the most serious global crisis since World War II, 75 years ago. And our character, whether as individuals or as a people, is determined, is tested by crisis. We always structure Jewish stories, even though there's bad news at the beginning. We will redeem that bad news by the good that it leads us to do. And we will write out of this a story of hope, because it's not only viruses that are contagious, so too are virtues.
The word chesed actually means love, but it's the love we do as opposed to the love we feel.
And then we get the extremes, the far right, the far left, the extreme religious and the extreme anti-religious, the far right dreaming of a golden age that never was, the far left dreaming of a utopia that never will be, and the religious and anti-religious equally convinced that all it takes is God or the absence of God to save us from ourselves. That too is magical thinking, because the only people who will save us from ourselves is we, the people, all of us together.
I call marriage love that becomes loyalty. That is the essential of human emotional literacy. How do you keep the family going? All I know is that you must. It seems to me that the Torah really understood that of all things, the most precious is time. It's the only thing that God gives to us equally on equal terms, however rich or poor, powerful or powerless. It is counting our time. That is the most important thing in life. How have we added to the store of human happiness? How have we made the world a little better?
So here is my simple suggestion. It might just change your life, and it might just help to begin to change the world. Do a search and replace operation on the text of your mind. And wherever you encounter the word self, substitute the word other. And if you do that, you will begin to feel the power of what for me is one of the most moving sentences in all of religious literature. Though I walk
through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. We can face any future without fear, so long as we know we will not face it alone.